no matter how good of a camera Nikon released, there were still going to be people not happy with it, right? Because look, people have been pent up and excited about this camera for almost a year plus, right? Thinking, when is the Z6 III going to come out? You know, Z8, Z9, we want a Z6 III. You get the camera and it's got a lot of great features inside of this thing. So, I mean, the partially stacked sensor, we've never seen that before. We've got the best EVF out of any Z camera. It's bright, it's sharp. I'll talk about that when it comes to the animal photography at the zoo. You've got fantastic video codecs inside of this thing. ProRes raw video. I mean, think about that for a camera under $3,000 US. It's just a really solid camera. Now, I did mention this in my first video and I'll say it again. I do wish it was more than 24 megapixels. I do. I wish it was 32, 33. That would give the average consumer out there a sense that this is an upgrade versus having 24 megapixels for the Z6, 24 megapixels for the Z6 II, 24 megapixels for the ZF, and now 24 megapixels for the Z6 III. Now, some of you say it doesn't make a difference. Actually, it still makes a difference. You can crop in a bit more, and especially when it comes to wildlife and sports photography, that additional resolution does make a difference. With that said, subject detection when it comes to animal photography, I was, just to put it bluntly, I was shocked how inconsistent this camera was. And I know it'll be fixed. Obviously, it's a firmware issue. This can be fixed. Nikon has shown how much they've improved autofocusing with the Z8 and Z9. But out of the gate with firmware 1.0, I was quite taken back. I went to the zoo as I normally do, and I bring the Z8 and Z9 in various different lenses to test there all the time. So I'm very familiar with how the cameras perform with a variety of different animals, not just dogs and cats or birds, but a variety of different animals. And the Z8 and Z9 perform very, very well. They're one of my favorite cameras to use when it comes to wildlife or animal photography for that matter. And the Z6 III was having a very difficult time, no matter if I was on all subjects or animals. It was kind of all over the place. It was detecting nostrils and ears and legs versus the eye that's right there, the face that's right there. And I even asked the Nikon reps, I'm like, is there a firmware update or is there an issue? Nothing that they've heard of. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Lightroom. I'm going to show you some of the images, sample images. We're going to do dynamic range tests with real world images, not charts, ISO, and also talk about the autofocusing. And then when I come back, I'll be doing a 6K ProRes RAW test with the camera. I'll be filming myself just to kind of wrap up this video. So with that, let's get down to it. Okay, so first we'll look at dynamic range, ISO, and then we'll go into the autofocusing. First, dynamic range, since everybody's talking about that. Now, this is an image that I actually edited, and I will show you the before right now so you get an idea how that looks. So my first set of edits I did was just sort of, bring out the detail here. You're going to see a little bit of this sort of pattern coming in the highlights here. So one thing I noticed with the Z6 III over the Z8 and Z9 respectively is there's not a lot of information in the highlights. So you need to really protect those highlights as much as possible. The shadows, you still have detail, but the highlights, they are quite sensitive. And after a little bit of topaz denoise, a little bit more edits, I got to this. Again, I would really paint this out or try to cover this up. This is a bit extreme. I wasn't really happy with this right there, but again, with the detail in the orangutan, actually looks pretty good. Now let's look at another image here. And we'll look at this who is climbing on the top of the ropes. And again, this is going to be good for dynamic range to give you an idea of what it can do. Normally when I do an edit like this, I just tend to do some basic shadows and highlights here and, work on my curve. And then I will go into masking because that's really where I like to play out a lot in terms of separating the subject from the background, really making sure that it pops a bit more. Now you're going to notice if you want to push it up, plus 94, it's just too much. So really around 37 thereabouts is pretty comfortable. And one thing that you need to know about Lightroom and Nikon cameras, I'm going to show you this real quick here, is that there's a lot of noise reduction that is being brought into this. This is exactly how it is when you bring an image in, so be careful of that. You can control it, but it is something to take note of. Every camera has a different profile. Right on the highlights here, and then we're gonna boost up the color, bring out the red a little bit in the fur, the saturation. And what I like to do, especially with animals, because you got a lot of fur and detail, is clarity and texture. Texture especially can really bring out a lot of nice detail. Look at how that's popping right there. Now, in terms of the information, we're at ISO 2000, so this is pretty much a clean image. I don't need to do much in terms of noise reduction here. Pretty happy with that. If I want to go back into the background a little bit more, I can. If I want to bring on the highlights a bit more there, bump up the saturation, a little bit of clarity just to make it pop, can do that. If you want to add a little bit of dehaze, which is kind of like contrast, you can make it pop a little bit that way. And that's pretty good, I have to say. I mean, again, this is just kind of a quick edit, but to give you an idea of how I edit these images. Now let's look at this image here. Now, one thing I noticed with the, this was already edited, by the way. This is the before edit, and this is after edit. So there's a lot of detail you can pull out of this. But I'm really playing. Look at what I did with the highlights and the shadows here. I went 100%, 100%, and just really started, bringing down different colors, working different things. The noise is completely down on this one. One thing I noticed is the image tends to be a little bit more overexposed than I saw in the Z8 and Z9. Now, it could be user error, I don't know, but I noticed, I go to the zoo quite often with Nikon cameras, so I'm pretty familiar with how they photograph there and how they work with lighting, and these tend to be a little bit more overexposed than I'm used to. Again, edits are a personal preference. You may like or dislike, from that to this. There's a lot of dynamic ranges there. Is it as good as medium format? No. Is it as good as the Z8 and Z9? I would say those cameras are a bit better. This does indeed handle its own, and as long as you expose correctly, there's going to be no issues at all with that. Let's try this with a person instead of animals. This little girl was getting her face painted. Now, first, what I like to do is go take a look and see if there's any sort of noise reduction, and there's a ton right there. So bring that down, because I am at ISO 7200. It's pretty clean for 7200 when you look in there. There's some grain there, but it's still relatively usable. And if I wanted to, bump up a little bit of that noise reduction there, I can, okay? Bring that up a little bit of luminance, and it's going to clean that up a bit. And obviously, if we really want to clean it up, we can use denoise and just absolutely just go like, bring this down to about 50. I don't think we need to go above that. Because if you never used this tool before, I highly recommend using it when you do need to use it, because it does clean up images quite well. I go between Topaz and Lightroom depending, but look at that. Look how clean that is. That's really good. And look at the detail on the face and the paint. Absolutely fantastic. Anyway, let's do a little bit of a quick edit here just to kind of give you an idea how it looks. Sometimes, by the way, if you are looking to find a different look, you can go into these presets here in Lightroom. And I tend to go around here if I want to get a little more of a cinematic look, play around with different colors. Like this gives me more of a kind of a film-esque cinematic look to it. Bring down the highlights here, bring up the shadows a bit more. You want to be careful with your clarity because you got a person there. You don't want them to look, a bit too much detailed, but yeah, just a bit there to kind of make that pop. I always like to kind of bring down the exposure in the background a bit, just to sort of make your subject pop a little bit more. That's something I do in a lot of my images, and I would definitely recommend it as well. Everyone's gonna have their own preference, but that's just my personal preference on that. Now, also one thing I like to do here is persons. So you can select that. Let's get a little bit more detail in the hair. So let's make a mask for that. Guys, if you're not using masks in Lightroom, you are missing out big time, because these things are a lifesaver and they speed up a lot of the workflow. Made the hair pop there, and I can do one more mask actually on her face because I want to get that paint in. So let's say I want to just add a little bit of texture just to make that pop a bit more right in this area. So I'm going to get that to pop. There's a lot of great detail here, a lot of information. The colors are good, really well exposed. I'm very, very happy with this image. And you know what? One great thing about Nikon and their lenses is that even though it is 24 megapixels, you are getting, it resolves higher than 24 megapixels in my personal opinion. It feels more like a 30-32. So keep that in mind. All right, so that kind of gives you an idea. Let's talk about ISO performance here real quick. I want to talk about this for a second here, because this image, when I saw this with my naked eye, this was really, really dark. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna show you the original image because I did an edit on this. It was, you could barely see this animal. It was deep in the shadows of the tree. And for whatever reason, Nikon's metering just nailed it. The EVF, it was bright. Now this is highly, obviously there's a ton of noise in this thing because it was really in the shadows, 22,800. And I have turned all the noise reduction off on this. So just to give you an idea how this is, after a bit of an edit, Topaz denoise, do a little bit of an edit. There's still a lot of detail there, and it cleans up extremely well. So again, edits are a personal preference you may like or dislike, but just to give you an idea. So this was the original image. I'm pulling in a lot of detail. I was shooting through trees, but this portion right here was just overexposed. So what I did is I went into Photoshop, generative fill, remove that. Guys, if you got the tools, use it. I'm not taking away from the image right here because this is my focus, but I just got rid of that white overexposed tree branch and a little bit of Topaz. This will play well on a screen, on web, Instagram. If you want to print this, it probably wouldn't look too bad. The one downside about 24 megapixels when you are, capturing wildlife is, again, is if you were going to crop in or if you want to get really up close to make sure you get maximum resolution, 24 is kind of the limit for the most part. Let's get into autofocusing. Now, this is where it gets very, very interesting and it's a little bit frustrating. And I'll talk about one instance, for example. So this elephant here, right? I mean, right there in front of me, you can't miss these. And I had it on animal eye tracking. A couple times it would get, and then sometimes it would just focus on this. Look, I mean, we're really much the same framing, but I'm quite shocked that I was getting this kind of performance out of the Z6 III after so many updates on the Z8 and Z9. And it's not the only situation this came about, right? I mean, there are others. Case in point, this would be it would be focusing here and not the eyes here. So if you really want to give you an idea, if I boost up the shadows here, this is not sharp here. It's more sharp in this area. So it was focusing here for whichever reason. I have no idea. And it was on animal eye detection. But sometimes it would nail it. Little off. It's hit and miss. My consistency with this camera was not as good as I'm used to having it. Feels a little bit better. Let's talk about these zebras here for a second. There are times it would focus on the nose here when I'm tracking the eye, or the ear. It'd be bang on. So you got to take multiple images. And again, when you're photographing animals, you probably will do that anyway. I just found that it was a little bit all over the place. And now with orangutans, it was interesting. When I tried to set it to all subject detection, which has animals and everything in it, it worked better than when it was just on animals alone. Tack sharp. But when I went to the other one, it would focus on this guy here, and this one was out. And that's when I was on the animal tracking, which is odd. I never had that happen before with the Z8 and Z9. Then once I switched to all subjects, it went here. So again, you're gonna have to play around with the settings. Hopefully Nikon does update this a bit, but it is what it is. And here's another situation where sometimes it captures the eye. Look at this right here. Perfect, this antelope. And then there's other times, gone. It's got the nose, missed the eye. So it would be mistaken the nose for the eye. And this eye is pretty big. I mean, this is not like a small eye. And there's another shot, the eye's in focus. All right, guys, that's it for the images. Let's go back to my final thoughts. All right, to wrap up this review, I'm actually shooting this portion of the video, 6K, 25p ProRes RAW internally on the Z6 III. How cool is that? The image quality actually looks pretty damn good, if I may say so myself. But let me say this. Look, we know the autofocusing, some issues with animals. Will it be fixed? I'm sure it will be fixed. We saw it with the Z8 and the Z9. They are so much better cameras than when they first launched. And the ZF has already been really good at launch and it's continually getting better. The Z6 III will be addressed. I can almost be certain of it. And if it's not, then I will be shocked. I will be like, wow, I didn't expect that, but it will be. Outside of that, though, you know, the drama around the Z6 III, I kind of feel like a lot of it's unwarranted. I really do. I feel like it's a lot of, you know, pixel peepers out there shooting charts, you know, doing all these scientific tests, but not actually taking the camera out there in the real world and capturing moments. We can shoot white walls and charts all day long, but that's not photography. That's not what these cameras were designed for. Yes, they're computers in a lot of ways, and yes, they do various different calculations in, you know, milliseconds, but they are designed to capture what is out there in the world. With beautiful lenses like this, that's what they're designed for. So with that, guys, those are my thoughts on the Z6 III. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you. With that, like, subscribe, and I will chat to you very, very soon. Take care.